Yo, what's up, people? Welcome to another episode of the Meathead on the Mic podcast. It's your boy. We're going to be rolling on everything else right now, very shortly. What is up? What's happening? What's up? When you guys and girls do join, let me know how your day is going. Welcome to another episode of the Meathead on the Mic podcast. Today, we're going to be having a conversation about perspective and sort of bridging the parallels with that when it comes to bodybuilders or bodybuilding, that lifestyle, a healthy, fit lifestyle, not even just bodybuilding, but, well, actually, we'll say any athlete that lives on that extreme and then the other extreme of bodybuilding or of living the life of completely not caring about your health, completely ignoring your physical activity, what you put in your mouth, things like that. So we're gonna be talking about the two polar opposites and how they're more similar than we think. And the one thing that I think you need to change in order to get yourself either to or from either extreme, right? You don't want to be in either extreme unless you want to compete or be a high caliber athlete. That's one thing, but being on the other end of the extreme is just dangerously unhealthy, even with bodybuilding. But there are less negative repercussions. We'll be getting into that very shortly. But when you guys and girls do join, let me know how your day is going. Okay. If you have any questions as I go throughout the podcast, you are more than welcome to drop them as a comment. And at the end of the podcast recording, I'll definitely answer as many questions as I possibly can. So, with that said, with that out the way, we'll be recording the podcast episode in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Yo, what's good, meatheads? Hope you're having an amazing day, and welcome to another episode of the Meathead on the Mic podcast. It's your returning champion, Matt Butale, IFBB PRO, coming at you with another topic. And today, I'll be sharing a weird perspective, drawing a parallel between two extremes that you may or may not have thought about. All right, we'll be looking at the similarities or differences when it comes to bodybuilders and the common fat guy, right? And no, I'm not saying that to bash you guys or girls, but I'm just saying there's a lot of parallels that both of them do the same, and or there's a one parallel that I will say that both sides of the extremes participate in, and the difference between the outcome of those two parallels. And again, it's not only a bodybuilder comparing to an obese person; it's literally any athletic extreme comparing to the extreme of not giving a fuck about your health, and how similar they are in terms of some, we'll say, health risks, but also what makes it so different, what brings either or to each pole of the extreme, right? And hopefully that can help you understand that the changes you need to make if you are obese aren't as dramatic as you think, right? They're not as dramatic because when it comes to the patterns, they're both repeated on either end, but the types of patterns, that's what we're going to be diving into. All right. So if that sounded a little bit confusing, I apologize, but we will be diving into this episode. So we'll be cracking open this Pandora's box so you can further understand what I'm trying to tell you guys here about the parallel between bodybuilders and just your common fat person. All right. So bodybuilders and obese people, they're more or less the same, as ironic as that sounds. Okay, and I'm speaking of like high caliber athletes or bodybuilders, right? So I may just say bodybuilders, but I'm referring to high caliber athletes as well. We are identical because we're both obsessed with food, right? Like, let's look at the first parallel. Food is what is one of the things that drives either or to any other parallel, right? The bodybuilders are obsessed with eating clean, are obsessed with making sure that, the fuel is going in, they're getting a good amount of calories or the necessary amount of calories, and then the macronutrients as well as also micronutrients. And, you get that stuff from eating whole foods that you can cook at home. Bodybuilders are obsessed with that. And then on the other end, right? The common fat guy or the common obese person, and again, when I say common fat guy or obese person, I'm not really shooting shots. I'm just using these terms to explain literally the difference. But the common fat person or the common obese person doesn't, have that severe obsession with control over the food, but they do have the obsession with taste, or at least more of an obsession than a bodybuilder or a high caliber athlete would, because the high caliber athlete is consuming these nutrients or these foods for function, for fuel. Whereas on the other end, it's there's still a high consumption of food because you can't get fat without eating a lot and not being physically active, but their obsession is with like the taste, for example. So there's something that draws them both to, we'll say, food or opposite ends of nutrition, and it's an obsession. The bodybuilder's obsession or the athlete's obsession to control clean food and always being as sharp as possible, almost being a robot, which we're going to talk about and how unsustainable that is for a long period of time. And then the other end of it, the other end of the spectrum, where the other person still eats a shit ton of food, but it's just not healthy food, and they're not controlling the amount of food that they're consuming, which brings me to the second parallel. Okay. Bodybuilders are obsessed with clean foods and portion control, right? I just talked about it. But obese people, they do the exact same thing. Like they have a food obsession of their own kind, and it's not for fuel. So because it's not for fuel, there's no portion control, right? But the food obsession still exists. I mean, yes, we need food to live, we need food to exist, right? Like, we got to discount that. But if we're talking about the polar opposites here, if we're talking about both ends of the spectrum and what makes them kind of similar, it's the fact that they both kind of have a food, I don't want to call a problem, but a food approach, and they're very different, but they're food approaches that are extremely consistent. With a bodybuilder, it's just consistent with portion control, and with the obese person, it's just consistent. Period. They're always eating, right? And it's likely going to be unhealthy and uncalculated portions, right? And also something, this is actually kind of a twist, and this, maybe I saw this, and you guys and girls may have saw this pop up in the last few years, but, and we're going to draw this parallel right now. Bodybuilders, and we already know this, are obsessed with their bodies, right? Like bodybuilders. It's in the name, bodybuilder. You're building your body, right? And you are more likely to see a bodybuilder show off and, uh, flaunt or whatever, or even pose in the mirror and stuff like that, and just be extremely confident, or have an extremely full sense of confidence, whatever it is. They're obsessed with their bodies and the way that it looks and the way that it performs when they're lifting, when they're recording their numbers and seeing how much they can perform. And literally for any other athlete, soccer as well, they're obsessed with their bodies. You got to make sure that your joints are functioning properly, you can perform the way that you need to perform, so on and so forth. It goes for any athlete that is on the extreme polar opposite, right? And this is sort of what I was talking about when I said this is something that's popping up more recently now. But I'm noticing now, like, obese people nowadays, within as recent as 2 to 3, even 5 years ish, nowadays are obsessed with forcing others to love their bodies. So the bodybuilders, more often than not, because not all of them, love their bodies and will, confidently show it off in an egotistical way most of the time. And then you got the obese people nowadays, at least within the last 3 to 5 years, that are forcing others to love their bodies. And it's not the exact same, but it's similar because it has to do with attention and the way you look, right? So if we can strip it down to attention and the way you look, then we can see that there is a similarity within bodybuilders or extreme athletes, um, and obese people, right? Except the approach is different. The fat phobia and all that stuff or whatever. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but that's sort of what I'm referring to when I say, most, a lot of, not most of, a lot of the overweight or the fat people or the obese people, whatever you want to call them, on social media. And sometimes I haven't seen it much in real life, honestly. It's pretty much something that only exists on social media unless you go to protests, which I don't. So the obese people would force others to love their body, where bodybuilders are so in love with their body that they're always showing it. And it's like, in that sense, similar but different, if you get what I'm saying. All right. The bottom line is this: if we're comparing bodybuilders or high caliber athletes to obsessed people, not obsessed, obese people, the common thing, the one parallel that I'll draw is that we're both obsessed on both ends of the spectrum. We're obsessed, right? The only difference is how we approach that obsession and the actions that we take in retaliation. Like the literal only difference, and from what I can see, from maybe what you can see, is constraint. You know what I mean? Like, how much can you constrain what it is that you want so that you can do what you need? And the wants and needs are different from both sides, right? And like, again, the reason why I'm bringing this up is to try to break the barrier and allow you guys and girls to understand that it only takes a few small decisions, if you are obese, to lean towards, again, I don't want you to be a bodybuilder, professional bodybuilder, or like a high caliber athlete. Like, if you want to, that's cool. But how to make the decisions to lean further away from being on the obese side of the polar opposite, and somewhere along the middle or closer to the middle, so that you can actually honestly love your body, have it function in a way where it actually will benefit your life as opposed to make your life more difficult, and so on and so forth, right? And you could even apply this on the other spectrum for bodybuilders or high caliber athletes that aren't in a season or off season getting ready to be the best in the world. If they're getting ready to be the best in the world, being feverishly obsessed and counting everything is kind of just necessary. But not everybody competes year round in whatever sport that it is. There's some downtime where they relax or take their foot off the gas, so that when they go right back into it for the next season, they're fully charged up and they're ready to be, robots for the time that they need to be robots, right? So this could be applied on both ends. If you're an aspiring bodybuilder, aspiring athlete, and you notice that you're pushing yourself to the fucking wall every single day for months and months at a time, and you're not making progress, then something that you might want to listen to is this episode. Where you get to pull back, or at least train yourself to pull back just a little bit, so you can shoot further the next time around, right? And then on the opposite end, the small changes that you would have to make as an obese person to get closer to the center of, the extreme of being extremely obsessed with fitness and not giving a fuck about health and fitness. If you're in the middle, you're golden, because you're likely going to experience the confidence of having a body you're proud of, the strength of having that body that you're proud of, being able to function in ways better than you were when you were obese, so on and so forth. So the middle is the best part, but there is a time and a place to go to the far, far extreme of being that athlete only for a period of time, which is necessary for that period of time. But anything outside of that for a prolonged period of time is going to be detrimental to your overall success or progress. All right. So let's break it down. We both love food and the way certain seasonings, dishes, and pastries taste, right? Like, that's human beings, right? But bodybuilders, or anyone who lives a healthy and active lifestyle, typically have a limit on how much they allow themselves to eat. We both love the way shit tastes, but bodybuilders will put a limit on how much, they eat based off of what they need to eat, so they can keep their body in control and not go out of control. Whereas on the other end, it's just, how good does this taste? I'm going to put it down my throat, and I'm not really going to control the portion, right? Which is in a way detrimental, not even in a way, in several ways, bad for you, right? So people that are obese have no clear or consistent limits when it comes to eating. That's the main thing. We can talk about lack of physical activity all day. We can talk about, you know, genetics to even being predisposed to some extent to packing on fat easier than the other person, but much it doesn't get past much further, at least, the fact that every human being's body applies to the law of thermodynamics, which means the amount of calories you put inside of your mouth, right? That's ultimately going to determine if you get fat or not, in conjunction with exercising and all that stuff. But most importantly, it's the food that you put in your mouth. And if you have no clear or consistent limits when it comes to what you put in your mouth, what you eat, then of course it's why you're in the position that you're in, why you are packing on 5, 6, 10 pounds every single year or every couple of months, right? Because you're not controlling what you're eating. But the bodybuilder would be able to pack on 5, 6, 10 pounds in a year, let's say, and it will be on the opposite end, of course, but they're still eating a lot of food. The only difference with the opposite end is that it's healthy food. It's calculated. So whatever they're doing is never out of control. And they're intentionally putting on those 10 pounds. Whereas for the obese person, it's kind of, not even kind of, it's almost always unintentional, right? Which is likely going to, not even likely, most likely going to put more fat on your body than any other tissue if you're obese and you gain weight. Whereas a bodybuilder or an athlete, when they gain weight, the intention is to gain weight, and the ratio of muscle to fat that they might be putting on will definitely be more favorable to having a healthier body, as opposed to someone who just puts on straight fat and water weight, right? Of course, when you add weight on your physique, it's not, even as bodybuilders, it's not ever going to be all muscle. Even if you're a bodybuilder or a high caliber athlete on PEDs, steroids, still not gonna, like, you're gonna put on fat and water no matter what. But the amount of muscle that you put on is going to make it more not even manageable. It's gonna make it so that when you are increasing your weight, you're increasing your productivity, your ability to perform heavier lifts in the gym. It has a purpose. It has a function. Like, everything has a function on the polar opposite side, whereas everything on the obese side has almost no function, almost no purpose. It's almost like mindless eating always, and then, like, not even having, or not paying attention to the fact that they're not training, things like that, right? So the one thing that you would need to change, the few things that you need to change to go from being obese on that polar opposite side, is literally not even the desire of the foods that you want to eat. Technically speaking, if I'm, like, getting as technical as possible, and we're saying that the law of thermodynamics applies to everybody, technically it almost doesn't matter what you eat, but as long as you control the amount of calories that you consume, and that the amount of calories that you're consuming represents the change that you are aiming to achieve. Like if you want to burn 10 pounds in like 3 months or something, then you're going to eat in a caloric limit, or your caloric limit is going to support that or reflect that. And then you don't pass that limit, you'll be losing your weight regardless of what you put in your mouth. It could be literally pizzas and burgers and wings and all that stuff. Of course, when it comes down to like the macronutrients and the micronutrients, there is a big downfall when it comes to food selection or the lack thereof. You want to have a good food selection so that you can get an adequate amount of protein, carbs, and fats while still respecting your caloric limits and also feeling full so that you don't end up overeating and binging. But the whole thing is what makes everything so similar is the fact that we both, like as human beings, we're already going to be obsessed with food. We need it to live. We already like, shit that tastes good. So we're going to eat shit that tastes good. But the difference is literally the control and having clear and consistent limits that you are able to enforce on yourself to get a desired result, right? And the extreme limits that are extremely consistent bring extreme results, which is why you have those, high caliber athletes or bodybuilders on the other end of the spectrum. But just having a moderate level of clear or consistent limits that is designed to allow you to get closer to your dream body is all you need. It's literally that one tweak of how much am I eating? That's what is gonna that's the first thing when it comes to the controlling of your weight and the fat that you got in your body. But the second thing, of course, would be training and exercise, which we already know. And then that's another simple binary decision. Am I going to go to the gym today or am I not? So the bodybuilder, that question most likely doesn't pop up in their head, but it could sometimes. It usually doesn't for the bodybuilder or the athlete. So they just go to the gym anyway. It's like almost instinctual because they know that, you know what I mean? Like it's a no brainer. It's almost like a reflex or a part of their day. It's like brushing your teeth. You go to the gym. Whereas on the other end, for those that are obese, they have to, overcome, I would say, that binary of yes or no. Am I going to go to the gym? Yes, there may be other variables. You've got kids. You work super long hours. The gym might be a little bit far or like an inconvenient place for you to go. But the and it comes down to the bottom line. Are you going to go or are you not going to go? Like, even though these extremes appear so extreme, they all boil down to one question, right? Are you willing to measure your food? Yes or no? Are you willing to go to the gym? Yes or no? And based off of that yes or no, you're able to tilt, on either end or to move, somewhere away from those two polar opposites where it's necessary for the bodybuilder or high caliber athlete to sometimes do, but it's even more necessary for the person that is obese because their health is on the line if they don't. And to be in the middle or somewhere around the middle, I personally would say is ideal, not just for the obese person but for everybody. Like the average person should be somewhere around the middle to have some control, or at least most control, over what they put in their body, how physically active they are, as opposed to not having any control whatsoever because they're a robot on autopilot trying to win the Olympia, or they're just on autopilot, not giving a shit about their health, not giving a shit about what they put in their mouth. Right. So to be somewhere in the middle is the best spot. And when I was thinking about, the average person and what habits you sort of need to have in order to literally be as healthy as possible, but also as happy as possible with your body, you're going to have, not have to, but it's likely you're going to have traits from both ends of the stick, from the extreme bodybuilding side and from the extreme, you know, people that are obese, that side, right? You're going to have traits from both of them that you're going to mix based off of where you are in your life. And the outcome of that will keep you around the middle where it's sustainable for you. And also, it's not too stressful for you to maintain, right? So again, guys and girls, the same thing applies to training. It's a binary. It comes down to a yes or a no. But depending on how many yeses and nos you're going to be saying, it's going to bring you to either part of the polar opposites, being obese or being super super fit, right? Like it's if we can boil it down and think of it like that, it's really less of a daunting task. Like, it's not as dramatic as we think. Like the appearance is dramatic. Maybe even looking at both of their rituals for eating and training might be dramatic when you look at them. But it's just a result of yeses and nos. Like if we think about that, we can sort of strip away the difficulty that is associated with either getting out of that hole of being obese or learning when to chill out as a professional athlete, right? Like there's so many similarities that I think we often overlook because the external shell, like looking at the person, it's like, how are we going to get out of that hole? Or how would I ever get to that level as like this professional bodybuilder? You know what I mean? So it's not as far fetched as we all think it is. Like our eyes definitely do deceive us when it comes to that, right? And guys and girls, let's break this down because we know that it's a bunch of yeses and nos. But how does an obese person develop the ability to create limits on their food so that, what they put in their mouth will actually help them lose weight? Like, what is it that you could do to move a little bit closer to the middle instead of being on either end of the polar opposites? Well, literally by shifting your mind from this looks delicious, let me have 10 wings or 10 Oreos or whatever it is, to this looks delicious, but I only need 3 Oreos because I'm looking at my caloric requirements and I'm not going to go over what I need. I only need these many to get to this overall limit. And having that limit and respecting it consistently is going to move you closer to the middle, right? Like it's as simple as that. The yes or no of am I going to eat more than I know I should eat? Yes or no. And if you say no to that, you're going to get your results. If you say yes, I'm going to eat more than what I need to eat, you're not going to get results and you're going to go in the opposite direction. And it is that simple. It is that simple. Yes, we can talk about mindset. Yes, we can talk about, how difficult it is for some people because of eating disorders, which does exist, but there's help for that. Help literally exists for that. There are therapists that are willing to help others, curb those crazy cravings to, fill in the holes in their heart or in their life with food, right? So that's if there's I would say if there's a method to help somebody, it could definitely be exploited and you can exploit that, get the results from controlling your mentality when it comes to food or your relationship with food, and then you can turn on the yes or no switch to either yes, I'm going to stay within my caloric limits, or no, I'm going to decide to not to. Right? Completely stripping the mental aspect of it. Of I was going through some trauma, and then I developed this eating disorder, so on and so forth, which does exist. It does exist, not just with obesity, but with anorexia. That shit does exist, right? But it's your responsibility to get help for that so that you can give yourself the power, the control to make the decision, the yes or no decision of what you are going to do with what's on your plate, with what you put in your mouth, and with your actions when it comes to going to the gym. Does that make sense? Okay. Like all you have to do is look at the numbers. If you're eating more than you need to eat less. Treat food like fuel, or at least treat food more like fuel, because let's get real here. Like bodybuilders are more able to treat food like fuel because it's like I'm a bodybuilder, I need to like put on the muscle, change my frame, this and that. It's an extreme. It's definitely an extreme, right? But if you are on the opposite end and you are obese and you don't even like understand that what you put in your mouth should be nutritious, or at least you don't care to understand, and you don't look at food as fuel whatsoever. You just look at it as like something sweet, something savory, something tasty to put down my mouth. That's dangerous, right? You don't always have to look at food like fuel, but you have to have some of like your ability to control your body is dependent on you having that mindset of this is fuel. You don't have to limit yourself to like super strict restrictions when it comes to the types of food that you have. I personally recommend for myself and my clients to eat clean 80% of the time and to eat bullshit junk 20% of the time. So eating clean 80% of the time is just clean at home cooked meals that are pre-measured, pre-packed, so I don't have to do all the thinking and measuring every day. I'll eat that 80% of the time, and then every odd time on the weekend, if I'm going out with some family, or even in the week when I want, I'll have a pizza or go out to the restaurant and, you know what I mean? Have some junk. And that's sustainable because I'm not being so strict that I'm not allowing myself to eat the shit that I actually love to eat. That may have a little bit more grease and fat in it, but I still love eating it, right? It's going to allow me to incorporate it. And if I do, then I'm less likely to break out and fucking shove a whole fridge down my mouth because I haven't had a pizza in 6 months, which is just not sustainable for a human being, in my opinion. Like you should be able to eat junk and still, lose your body fat and still put some muscle on and still enjoy your life, right? So all you have to do is look at the numbers and then walk to that yes or no binary, assuming that you've taken care of what you need to mentally take care of to give yourself the power to even ask yourself the yes or no question. All right. And then you're going to have to literally eat less if you're obese. Treat food more like fuel, but you don't want to overflow the gas tank, metaphorically speaking. Right. Like you can still enjoy burgers, donuts, pizza, all that if they fall under your caloric and macronutrient requirements, right? You don't need to be, I'm only eating 100% clean food that I'm cooking at home, or it's nothing at all. Like, that's even for me as a professional bodybuilder, I don't do that forever. Like, I can only do that for the months leading up to my stage presence, right? My competition, training at a super high volume, doing ridiculous amounts of cardio, cutting my calories gradually but still extremely, and just doing a whole bunch of shit, extra shit that I would have to be a robot to do consistently, right? That only lasts for a certain period of time. Then outside of that, I'm a regular human fucking being, going to go enjoy my burgers, pizza, and donuts, right? But I'm still making sure that they fall under my caloric requirements and my macronutrient requirements so that I can still apply the fact that food is fuel and not lose complete control going in either direction. Does that make sense? Like, this is why you notice that bodybuilders or even athletes or your whatever, your skinny friends can destroy a pizza every other weekend and not get fat, but you do because I mean, what's the difference? Even though they're having pizza every other weekend, they're making sure that it still respects their caloric requirements and their macronutrient requirements, so they never overdo it. They never do too much. Even though it seems like it's so much, they're not always eating pizza every day. It's 20% of the time if you're applying my philosophy at least, right? So, again, guys and girls, and like let me just be vulnerable here. Let me just spill the beans. I eat pizza almost every week. Like I had pizza I think last week or 4 or 5 days ago, right? And when I have pizza, I don't plan, "Oh, I'm gonna have a pizza and then this and that." Like, it's more or less intuitive. I'm eating clean, I would say even 90% of the time. When I'm slipping up, 80% of the time. So when I want a pizza, I'll have one, but I'll make sure that I'm not gonna have 3 pizzas when I have that initial craving, because 3 pizzas would be over my limit. Does that make sense? So it's the it all it, everything. It boils down to a yes or no. Like everything, all of it. It boils down to a yes or no, right? As far as the two opposites might be on either spectrum, a bunch of yeses and nos bring you to either end, right? And saying yes to all the extreme shit is going to bring you to the extreme of bodybuilding, and saying yes to all the other extreme shit, which is going to bring you close to obesity. Like, yes, I'm going to have 10 more slices. Yes, I'm not going to go to the gym, to the gym for like another 3, 6 months or a year. Like it just comes down to yes or no, and the ability to mentally stick to that yes or no decision. Bodybuilders are different if we're looking at physiques, if we're looking at bodies, if we're looking at mindsets. For the most part, I think most bodybuilders are mentally strong when I'm comparing them to just the average Joe, right? But it doesn't mean that, and again, you don't have to be a bodybuilder for this, but it doesn't mean that you can't train yourself to get some of those far end extreme traits, or at least half of them, or even a quarter of them, into your lifestyle so that you can get closer to having a body you're more proud of. Not that you want to be Mr. Olympia or win a bodybuilding competition, but if you're obese, you're overweight, and you want to, be more in control, and you want to burn some fat, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 25 pounds, you're going to have to adopt some of the ideas or some of the similar answers when we're coming down to the binary that the other extreme would have to accept, or that they would commonly accept, in order to get some of the similar results. Like it really is not that different. We are literally all the same. We just say yes and no to a bunch of different shit. And then our actions, of course, line up with our words. And then that's how we end up on wherever part of the spectrum we're at. Right. So, like, I really wanted to nail that point down with you guys and girls today. Like, it's not as difficult as we really think it is. In order to control the weight on the scale, you must obey the rules of the food scale and macronutrients and calories. I'm going to repeat that again. In order to control the weight on the scale, so when you step on the scale and you look at the weight and it's a number that you're not fucking happy with, and you look in the mirror, you can see your man boobs if you're a guy, or your guts hanging way over your belt. If those are the things that piss you off, and like that exists in your life, and you step on the weight scale and you look at that number and it's something you're not proud about, you have to understand this. In order to control the weight on the scale, you must be in full and complete control of the numbers on your food scale, which means you're measuring your food and you're not overeating based off of your caloric requirements in order to get a desired result. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, guys and girls? If it makes sense, just nod your head silently. Okay? That's it. I wanted to draw that parallel. Hopefully, I did. Hopefully, you understood it. And now you understand everything just boils down to a yes or no, and how many yeses and how many nos that you're going to be making in order to get to a desired result. It's not as difficult as we make it look. You don't need to be perfect and adopt every single value of a bodybuilder, but adapting some of them, even a fraction of them, is going to help you move out of of that pocket on the polar opposite. Essentially being obese. All right. That's it. That's all. If you like this episode, share it out with a friend. Don't forget to screenshot and share this podcast out to your IG story or your TikTok story or Facebook story, wherever you're watching this, YouTube as well. I want you guys and girls to share this out if you got value, because maybe somebody else might need to listen to this message and get some of the information that we're sharing with you guys and girls today. I want to let you know also, if this is your first time tuning in on the Meathead on the Mic podcast and you're watching this on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, or even Twitter, we do have episodes that are uploaded every single week. We do 4 to 5 episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Again, that's Meathead on the Mic podcast. Check that out. We are at episode number 106 right now, and I want you guys and girls to scan through, see which episode titles you might like to listen to, and just let me know if you like hearing about those topics so that we can cover them further, or at least a little bit more in depth, so that I can give you guys and girls the answers to the questions that you already have. All right, let's embrace your inner meathead together. It's been nice chatting. Hope you like what today's topic was about. IFBB PRO Matt Butale signing out. Boom. Yes, people. Yes, episode's recorded. It's done. All right. Hey, we have no questions today, which is actually hasn't happened in a while, but I'll accept that. Sarah, I appreciate the follow. Or is it Sarah? Appreciate the follow. Jaden, I appreciate the follow. Val, thank you for following and tuning in. Jaden, what's good? Lucas, what's up, Lucas? Lucas has a question. He says, doing my first show on the 29th, which is about what now? 23 days from now. 29th. Any tips? So, first of all, what division is it? Let's get a little bit specific here. What division are you competing in? Are you competing as a natural athlete? Answer those two questions for me. And then we're going to dig a little bit deeper so that I can help you out wherever I can, man. I appreciate you, Lucas. Thanks for actually hopping up and asking a question. Takes courage. So if you could just answer those questions. So men's physique, not natty. How long have you been cycling? If you feel comfortable talking about that, you can. If you don't feel comfortable, let me know. Like I completely understand. Prep cycle started in July. Okay. So okay. Personally, I'm gonna let you know this. I've never competed um not being natural. Like I've always been natural. So my advice might be a little bit skewed, but for more or less it's gonna be similar. Your first show, okay. So you started in July prepping, and I assume that would be like your cutting, right? So July, August, September, and now we're October. So about almost 16 weeks out, which is okay. That's good. 16 weeks plus is a good time to get lean for a show. So if you're worried about, am I going to be lean enough or did I prepare enough? You gave yourself enough time, but depending on how consistent you were and how accurate you were with or your coach's approach to your prep, you shouldn't be too worried, because 4 months is ample time to get ready for a show, especially your first bodybuilding show. Okay, so one tip that I'd recommend, and I see this a lot, and this is not going to be related to your prep because there's so much background information that we would have to know in order to talk about your prep and how lean you are or should be, stuff like that. So outside of that stuff, I'm going to talk about presentation here, man, because your first show is definitely going to look like your first show. But the whole point of it, or at least what I would make the whole point of it, is to make it not look like your first show, if that makes sense, which is going to give you like a boost of confidence, right? You're gonna know where you stand when you apply what I'm about to talk about in a little bit, and it's you're gonna actually find the joy in competing because of the art form and not necessarily because of the performance, if that makes sense. So, what I am talking about when I say not making your first show look like your first show is literally nailing the absolute fuck out of your stage presence. Nailing the absolute fuck out of it. And what does that mean? What do you do in order to do that? My answer to that question would be making sure that you do not fucking skip your posing practice and that you actually try hard and do more than what you should do in posing practice so that when it comes time on stage, like you're unshaken. So what does that look like? So for example, so if I'm not too familiar with the rules in men's physique as amateurs because I've never competed as a men's physique amateur or a men's physique pro. But there's a certain required amount of time that you're going to be on stage, right? So you got your prejudgings. You're going to walk on, do your own round. You're going to introduce yourself, and then you're going to be on the line with the boys, whatever call out you get out on, right? What I'm talking about looks like you being on that lineup and not looking exhausted, not shaking, not looking nervous, any of that. And how do you train those attributes? How do you improve on those things before that experience of going on stage? Personally, I would look at the criteria. Okay. When they put you out there on prejudging, so when they put you out there on finals and you're with the boys doing your front relaxed, your back relaxed, you're doing your poses for men's physique, they're going to keep you there maybe around say 20 seconds to 30 seconds per pose, and that's like pushing it, right? Because there are a lot of guys in men's physique, so it might even be less time than that. So what that means is you're going to have to hold your poses for like 20 to 30 seconds on stage. But in order to have that unshakable confidence, that almost professional looking stage presence, what I would recommend in your practice, and this is something that I've done with myself and my best clients, is to literally quadruple the amount of time that you would be spending on stage holding a pose. So let's say this: you're done your workout, you did your cardio, and I don't know if you and your coach are doing sauna or whatever the deal is, but you do your thing, right? After your training session, your physical training session, what I would recommend that you do is, Lucas, go into a room where you've got mirrors, wherever you practice your posing. And I assume you're practicing posing. And this is something that I would have done, literally the moment I would have started prepping 16 weeks out. So you're gonna do your posing routine and your practice, all that stuff. But when it comes down to the mandatory rounds, understanding that it's gonna be 30 seconds you're standing out there, I would recommend holding every single pose as hard as possible for at least 120 seconds. Okay, 2 minutes. So put a timer up on the floor, whatever it is, have your headphones in, look at the mirror, hold the pose, do any tweaks to make sure that you look the best possible way, figure out how you're going to be standing, and hold it, contract it as hard as you can for 2 minutes. And then, do your quarter turns or, you turn to the back because it's men's physique, right? So all of that stuff and work on your transitions, how smooth they are, and even work on it on both sides so that you become ambidextrous and it's almost like it's a reflex. You don't have to think about transitioning. It's like I've done it so many times. I've spent so many fucking hours doing it that when I go on stage and they ask me to do it for a fraction of the time that I've been practicing, not only will I do this effortlessly without having to fucking waste a breath, but you will also look super professional because your muscles will be contracted like literally the entire time that you're on stage, which is a plus, right? And by doing that, you won't actually be too exhausted because you've literally 4x the time that you spend on stage in practice. So your stamina and your stamina will go up, your posing presence will go up. The only thing that you have to make sure is that you're posing accurately, that you're showing off your strong points, which of course you're going to be able to do if you're practicing consistently and holding every pose for at least 2 minutes, right? So what I would recommend for for your first show, just to wrap it up, bro, over practice your posing. Like do enough for your posing and then do more. And then if you have extra time, do even more because the posing presence is what's going to set you aside from being that amateur to looking more seasoned. You know what I mean? Like most amateurs will go on for the first show out of breath in the first round of the posing round, out of breath completely. And you don't want that look on you because not only are you going to feel out of breath, but feeling out of breath and sweating and now you're giving away because you can't hold everything is going to make you nervous and that's going to show on your face, it's going to show on your physique and ultimately you're going to get nervous as fuck on stage. and you're going to get nervous as fuck going back on stage or even competing at your next show, right? So that's something you got to be aware of mentally, because in order to love the process, you must overdo the practice. I'm going to repeat that again. In order to love the process, you must overdo the practice, because that's where your confidence is going to come from. Like, take it from even my first show. Although I was nervous, I spent an irresponsible amount of time practicing posing, like a ridiculous amount of time. Like, I was holding poses for like 5 to 6 or 7 minutes long at a time before I would transition. When on stage, it would only allow me to hold that pose for 30 seconds, 45, even a minute's tops. And sometimes if you're with a really good lineup, they'll hold you for like a minute and a half and see who's shaking and who's giving up, who really didn't practice posing. But if you practice for fucking 7 minutes, you can stand there for five, which would never happen, but you could stand there for five and still look amazing. So if they're cutting down the time, your endurance is up and you know how to pose, you look good. And that's what I would focus on the most, looking good. Not nailing my prep for my first show, because every prep is going to be different. You're going to learn so much as you go along the way. But and your body's going to change, so you're going to have to change your approach. But the one thing that you can control, that is a variable that won't really change much, is your motherfucking posing and stage presence. So I hope that helped you out. Lucas says, thanks, bro, you're a huge inspo for me. I appreciate you, dog. Thank you for actually reaching out and asking the question. Most people, just sit there and they don't ask, which I don't know why they even tune in then. But I appreciate you for actually making use of the time that you've got today and asking the question, man. So salute to you and good fucking luck for your very first show. Let me know how that goes. Hit me up. Definitely, I want to hear how that goes. But really, start practicing posing from now. Like, they're going to hold you on for your mandatory poses for at least 30 seconds each round before you turn. So 30 seconds front facing, 30 seconds in the back, and then they'll probably repeat. But if you can hold both of them for at least 2 minutes each in your own practice, that in your head is the confidence that you need to go on stage and not worry about how you look, because you know that you're controlling everything for every second that you're gonna be on stage and there's nothing to worry about. Period. So that's one thing that helped me a lot with my confidence going to my first show, especially stage fucking presence. So posing, man, pose, pose, pose. Also, it's gonna help your workouts, right? Because you're doing isometric holds. But yeah, man, I appreciate that. I really do appreciate you reaching out, and I hope that you do very well at your first show. All right, folks, that is it. That is all. We'll be back again later on in the week to drop another episode, 107. If you guys and girls have any ideas or anything that you want to hear about or you want me to talk about, definitely shoot me a DM and I'll make an episode based off of that. And we can just really dive deep and I can give you my perspective as to what it is that you want to know about. All right. So that's it. That's all. I appreciate you guys and girls so much for giving me the time out of your day. IFBB Pro Maputale signing out. Boom.